Well, hello there. In this video, we're going to explore what's called the SAS congruence postulate. If you think you know what SAS stands for, why don't you go ahead and write it down right now? Boom! If you wrote side angle side, you'd be correct. Now, what does side angle side stand for? What it means is that if two triangles have a side next to an angle next to a side that matches on both triangles, then those triangles are in fact congruent. So I'm going to write, it means if two triangles have a side next to an angle next to a side that's the same on both triangles, then the triangles are congruent. You might have to pause this. A little long. Okay, so what does this look like? Well, if you got two triangles like this, if you want to prove they're congruent by side angle side, you need to look at a pair of side angle sides on each triangle that line up and show, in fact, that they are the same. So looking at this triangle over here, I'm going to highlight the side, the angle, and the side that we're focusing in on. Notice how, in fact, that letter A in side angle side falls in between the two sides. That's why we call it side angle side, is because the angle has to be between the two sides we're focusing in on. On the second triangle, the corresponding side angle side would have to be, I'm going to highlight it, side QR, QS, with angle Q. Now, to really prove it, to be very thorough in our geometry, we have to make a statements of congruence that show which side and which angles correspond to each other. So I'm going to start with side BA from the first triangle, and I'm going to write down side BA. I want you to now write next to BA, right here, right there, what side on the second triangle corresponds to that. If you wrote QR or RQ, you would be correct. Now we got to talk about the angle. On the first triangle over here, we're talking about angle A. So we got angle A. Angle A is congruent to which angle on the second triangle? If you wrote Q, you'd be right. One more side statement we need to make. We need to make one more statement of congruence. Why don't you go ahead and write down that side for both the triangles that's congruent, and we'll get the show on the road. If you wrote AC and QS, you'd be right on, because that's the side that's congruent. So this is a way to prove these two triangles are congruent. All you have to show is that a side and angle on the side are the same on both triangles, and they're congruent. So let's get some practice in. Let's take a look at this right here. Now, before we go and try to figure out if these are demonstrating side angle side, we need to mark every set of triangles that are sharing vertical angles, and they're demonstrating the reflexive property. That is, they're sharing a side. We got to put tick marks on that. So go ahead and mark on 1, 2, or the third one any of those properties. So reflexive property and vertical angles. So go ahead and find those on any of the triangle pairs you see above. If you're ready, take a look at this. I, in fact, found one example of each. In the middle triangle, I saw that there are a pair of vertical angles, so I marked them congruent because they are congruent by vertical angles. Now, on this side over here, the last one, we see the reflexive property. They share a side, which means that side is congruent for both of the triangles. Now let's take a look at number 1 and try to figure out whether they are congruent by side, angle, side. I notice when I look at number 1, they do have two sides that have identical tick marks, and they do have an angle. Angle K and angle M are in fact congruent, but there's a problem. In side, angle, side, the A is located between the S's, meaning the angle must be surrounded by the sides that are congruent. That's not the case, because this side's way over here. If this was going to be side, angle, side, it'd have to be this side, this angle, and that side, and it's not the case because this angle is not between the two sides of the congruent. So this would be a big, fat no. Yeah, those are not congruent by side, angle, side. Now let's take a look at the middle one. If you think those are congruent by side, angle, side, I want you to write the word yes. If you think they are not congruent by side, angle, side, I want you to write the word no. Take a moment, think about where the angle and the sides are congruent, and write your answer. Oui! If you wrote yes, you would be right. If you look at the sides, the angles that are congruent are right in between the sides that are congruent. That is a side, angle, side. Now let's go to the last one over here. Think about it and write your answer. If you wrote yes, you'd be right. Because in fact, side, angle, side, over here, side, angle, side are all marked congruent on both triangles. So that demonstrates side, angle, side.